Commander Zorath Vex of the Galactic Dominion stood on the observation deck watching as his fleet prepared to bombard yet another pathetic planet into submission. Just another Tuesday in the grand scheme of universal conquest. The massive viewscreen displayed a blue-green marble suspended in the void. A world the natives called Earth. How utterly unimaginative. Status report, he demanded, not bothering to turn around. Officer Nilataz, his second-in-command, stepped forward with practiced precision. All weapon systems primed, Commander. The humans appear to be attempting some form of communication. Of course they are, Zorath scoffed, finally spinning around on his heel. His four violet eyes narrowed in contempt. They always try to talk when they should be surrendering. Put them through. Might as well hear their pitiful pleas before we reduce their cities to smoldering craters. The central screen flickered, revealing a single human female with dark hair and determined eyes. No uniform, no obvious military rank, just civilian clothing. How insulting. "This is Dr. Amara Jackson of Earth," she announced, her voice calm despite the circumstances. "To whom am I speaking?" Zorath spread his forearms in a gesture of mock grandeur. "Commander Zorath Vex of the Galactic Dominion, soon to be your new overlord. Assuming we leave enough of your species alive to rule, that is." He flashed what passed for a smile among the Drelari, a terrifying display of needle-like teeth that would send most sentient beings running for cover. The human didn't flinch. "Curious? Commander Vex, I request a meeting before you commence your attack. Just one representative from our world, just me." Zorath let out a barking laugh that echoed across the command bridge. His crew joined in dutifully. "And why would I waste my valuable time with such nonsense?" "Because," Dr. Jackson replied, "I have information about your species that you don't possess, information that could change everything you think you know about yourselves." Officer Taz leaned close to Zorath's primary auditory receptor. "Commander, this is highly irregular. Standard protocol dictates immediate commencement of hostilities." Yes, I'm aware of protocol," Zorath hissed. But something about the human's confidence nagged at him. The Drelari had conquered 17 star systems over the past decade. Their biological superiority was unquestioned. Their immunity to physical pain made them perfect warriors, fearless and unstoppable. And yet, this insignificant creature dared to suggest she knew something about his kind that he didn't. "You have 1 hour," he finally declared. "One shuttle. Unarmed. Any deviations and we obliterate your largest population centers without hesitation." Dr. Jackson nodded. "Understood. Thank you, Commander." The transmission ended, and Zorath turned to his bewildered crew. "What? I'm bored. This might provide momentary entertainment before the slaughter begins." "Sir," ventured Communications Officer Drekparn, his skin flushing a nervous yellow, "the Supreme Council specifically ordered no direct contact with the humans. Their psychological profile suggests they are unpredictable." Zorath waved a dismissive hand. "The Supreme Council isn't here, are they? Besides, what harm could possibly come from one unarmed human? Our species literally cannot feel pain. We are invincible." Little did he know how wrong he was. The shuttle bay decontamination process took an unnecessarily long time, in Zorath's opinion. He paced impatiently, flanked by 6 heavily armed guards. Not that he needed protection from a single human, but appearances mattered when you were subjugating inferior species. Finally, the inner doors parted with a hydraulic hiss, revealing Dr. Amara Jackson. In person, she appeared even less impressive than on the view screen. Small, fragile-looking, with none of the natural armor or impressive appendages that mark truly evolved species. "Commander Vex," she greeted him with a small nod. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "Skip the pleasantries," Zorath snapped. "You claimed to possess information about my species. Speak quickly before I lose what little interest I have in this charade." Dr. Jackson didn't appear offended. Instead, she reached into a pocket and withdrew a small device. "May I?" "It's just a datapad. No weapons." Zorath gestured to one of his guards, who stepped forward and scanned the object before nodding. "This," she began, activating the device to display a 3-dimensional representation of Drelari neural anatomy, "is why your species doesn't feel physical pain." Zorath yawned dramatically, all 4 arms stretching in different directions. Yes, our neural pathways lack pain receptors. This is elementary biology. Human, is this really what you've wasted my time for? Not quite, Dr. Jackson continued, unfazed. Your species doesn't lack pain receptors. They are there, they are just disconnected. This caught Zorath's attention, though he tried not to show it. Explain. Your ancestors evolved on a high-radiation planet. Over millions of years, a genetic mutation occurred that separated your physical sensation neural network from your emotional processing center. It was an evolutionary advantage. Warriors who couldn't feel pain conquered those who could. Zorath shrugged. This is still information we possess. Your point? Dr. Jackson swiped across her device, revealing a new image. A Drelari brain with certain pathways highlighted in red. What your species doesn't know is that the connection isn't gone. It's dormant. Under specific conditions, it can be reactivated. For the first time, Zorath felt a twinge of something. Not fear, certainly. Drelari didn't feel fear, but perhaps concern. And how exactly would you know this when our own scientists don't? Because humans specialize in pain, she replied simply, both causing it and understanding it. We've been studying your species since your first conquest in this sector 3 years ago. We've had test subjects. Zorath's upper lip curled, prisoners of war who revealed nothing of value. On the contrary, Commander, they revealed everything. Dr. Jackson's tone remained maddeningly calm. Your species has been modified over generations by your government. Genetic tempering to enhance the disconnection between physical and emotional response, but they made a critical error. Despite himself, Zorath leaned forward slightly, which was, in eliminating physical pain, they inadvertently created a back door to something much worse. Emotional pain, specifically regret. Officer Taz, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. This is absurd. Drelari experienced the full range of emotions. Do you? Dr. Jackson asked, her head tilting slightly. Anger, yes. Pride, certainly. Satisfaction, amusement, boredom. But do you ever feel sadness, grief, remorse? The question hung in the air, and Zorath found himself strangely unable to dismiss it immediately. Those are weaknesses, he finally declared. Evolutionary dead ends. They are essential components of advanced consciousness, Dr. Jackson countered, and they are still within you, dormant. I can prove it. Zorath should have ended the conversation there. Should have ordered the guards to take this presumptuous human to a cell and commenced the attack on her world immediately. But something, curiosity, perhaps, made him hesitate. How? He asked. Dr. Jackson held up a small vial containing a clear liquid. This compound temporarily bridges the gap in your neural pathways. It doesn't restore physical pain, that modification is too deeply embedded. But it does reconnect your emotional centers to your experiential memory. Zorath barked out a laugh. And you expect me to what? Drink your mystery potion? Do you take me for a fool? I expect you to be scientifically curious, she replied. Isn't that what advanced species pride themselves on? Discovery, understanding, or is the mighty Drelari Empire afraid of a little self-knowledge? The challenge was transparent but effective. Zorath snatched the vial from her hand. Commander, I strongly advise against this, Officer Taz protested. Your concern is noted, Zorath replied dryly, and ignored. Without further hesitation, he uncapped the vial and swallowed its contents in one gulp. For several seconds, nothing happened. Zorath's smug expression remained firmly in place as he prepared a cutting remark about human scientific incompetence. Then it hit him. Not pain exactly. Something else. Something worse. Memories began flooding through his consciousness, but not as the clinical recollections he was accustomed to. Each came with a weight, a terrible pressure that seemed to crush his chest from within. The first colony his fleet had destroyed, not just the tactical data of the bombardment, but the consequences. The lives extinguished, the suffering caused, the absolute terror on the faces of the colonists as the Drelari troops marched through their burning settlements. What is this? He gasped, staggering backward. Dr. Jackson's voice seemed to come from far away. This is regret, Commander Vex. This is the burden that humans and most sentient species carry with them every day. The awareness of the consequences of our actions. Another memory surfaced. A failed military campaign early in his career. 700 Drelari soldiers lost due to his miscalculation. He processed it as a tactical error at the time, a data point to improve future strategy. Now suddenly he felt the loss of each life like a physical blow. Families without parents, children without guardians, all because of his arrogance. "Make it stop," he growled, his voice barely recognizable even to himself. "I can't," Dr. Jackson replied quietly. "The compound only opened the door. What you are experiencing comes from within you." Zorath collapsed to his knees, all four arms wrapped around himself as if trying to hold his very being together. The guards moved forward uncertainly, weapons raised but unsure what exactly they were meant to be fighting. "Stand down," Officer Taz ordered them, then turned to Dr. Jackson. "What have you done to him?" "I've shown him the truth," she answered. "Your species isn't immune to pain, you've just been disconnected from the most important kind." Zorath was barely listening now. 3 decades of military service, hundreds of conquered worlds, millions, perhaps billions of lives destroyed or subjugated under his command. Each action, each order, each death now carried a weight that threatened to crush him entirely. "Why?" he managed to choke out, looking up at the human with all four eyes wide in distress. "Why show me this? It changes nothing. We will still destroy your world." Dr. Jackson knelt before him, bringing herself to his eye level. A dangerous move, but she seemed unconcerned. "Because humans understand something your species has forgotten. Pain, both physical and emotional, serves a purpose. It's information. It tells us when we are causing harm to ourselves and others. Without it, you've become monsters without realizing it." Through the haze of newfound emotional turmoil, Zorath noticed something puzzling. "You don't seem afraid. Your world is still at the mercy of my fleet." For the first time, Dr. Jackson smiled. "About that, while we've been having this enlightening conversation, human operatives have been distributing this same compound throughout your ship's ventilation system." As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the shuttle bay. Officer Taz's communicator buzzed with urgent messages. "Commander," she reported, her voice tight with concern, "we have widespread disruption throughout the fleet. Crew members they appear to be in some form of distress." Zorath struggled to his feet, fighting against the crushing weight of 3 decades of atrocities now fully felt. "You planned this all along." "We call it Operation Conscience," Dr. Jackson confirmed. "No weapons, no direct attacks, just the truth you've been hiding from yourselves." "Sir," Officer Taz continued, her skin tone shifting to a distressed purple, "the reports indicate the effect is spreading to all 17 ships in the fleet. Command structure is breaking down. Many officers are incapacitated." Zorath wanted to rage, to order immediate retaliation, to destroy this human and her entire world for what they'd done. But each violent impulse now came with a preview of the consequences, a preemptive flash of regret that stopped him before he could even form the words. "This won't last," he said instead, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "The compound will wear off." "It will," Dr. Jackson agreed, rising to her feet. "In approximately 6 hours. But the neural pathways it activates don't simply close again. They remain partially open, diminished but present. Every Drelari exposed will retain some capacity for regret, not as overwhelming as what you are experiencing now, but enough to reconsider certain actions." Zorath stared at her in dawning horror. "You've infected us, changed us, fundamentally. We've restored something that was taken from you," she corrected. "Something essential." The command bridge was calling for instructions, but Zorath couldn't bring himself to respond. The weight of what he now understood, what he now felt, made military protocol seem suddenly meaningless. "Your species conquered worlds because you couldn't feel the consequences," Dr. Jackson continued. "You destroyed civilizations because it registered as nothing more than strategic success. But now you know, now you understand what you've done. What will you do with that knowledge, Commander Vex?" Zorath looked at his trembling hands, hands that had ordered the deaths of countless beings without a moment's hesitation. For the first time in his life he found himself without an immediate answer, without certainty. The human was right. Everything had changed. And the most terrifying part was, he wasn't sure he wanted it to change back. On the observation deck, Officer Nyla Taz watched as Commander Zorath Vex sat motionless in his command chair, staring into the void of space. 3 hours had passed since the human's departure, and still he had given no orders to resume the attack. The fleet hung in Earth orbit, weapons armed but silent. Throughout the ship, the effects of the human compound were beginning to subside from their initial intensity. Crew members were returning to their posts, though many moved like sleepwalkers, their expressions haunted in ways Taz had never seen before. She approached the commander cautiously. "Sir? The tactical team awaits your order to commence the bombardment. The target coordinates are locked." Zorath didn't immediately respond. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "Did you know, Officer Taz, that on Nalaris Prime their young have a distinctive cry when separated from their parents? I never noticed it during our invasion." "Not really. There's just background noise while we process the adults for labor camps." Taz shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, with respect, the mission parameters." "I hear it now," Zorath interrupted, tapping the side of his head. "In here. Perfectly preserved in my memory, though I paid it no attention at the time. Along with thousands of other details from hundreds of other worlds. All the data was there. I just couldn't feel it." He finally turned to look at her, and Taz was startled by the change in his eyes. The cold calculation was gone, replaced by something she had no reference point to understand. "Contact the Supreme Council," he said suddenly. "I wish to discuss alternative approaches to this planet." Taz blinked in surprise. "Alternative approaches? But the invasion protocol is clear." "The protocol was created by beings who couldn't feel the consequences of their actions." Zorath cut her off. "Perhaps it's time we reconsidered more than just this mission." As Taz moved to carry out his orders, still confused but dutiful, Zorath turned back to the view screen. The blue-green planet still hung there, unaware of how close it had come to destruction, or how fundamentally it had just changed the course of an entire empire. The human, Dr. Jackson, had said something before departing that continued to echo in his mind. "Pain isn't your enemy, it's your compass. Without it, you've been lost for generations." For the first time in his life, Commander Zorath Vex wondered if she might be right. And if she was, what that meant for everything he thought he knew about his species, his empire, and himself. The regret was still there, a dull ache where once there had been nothing. But alongside it, something new was beginning to form. Something he had no name for yet, but which felt strangely like possibility. The Supreme Council chamber on Drelari Prime hadn't changed in 7 centuries. Imposing black stone columns stretched toward a vaulted ceiling painted with scenes of glorious conquest. 17 high-backed chairs, one for each conquered system, formed a perfect circle around the central speaking platform. It was meant to inspire awe, to remind everyone of the Dominion's unshakable power and tradition. Today, it felt like a mausoleum. Zorath Vex stood on the speaking platform, acutely aware of the 9 pairs of eyes boring into him. 9, not 17. Nearly half the council seats remained conspicuously empty, their occupants too indisposed to attend following exposure to the human compound. Even among those present, Zorath noted subtle changes, nervous twitches, gazes that couldn't quite meet his own, the occasional 1,000-yard stare as some memory resurfaced with its newly attached emotional weight. "So," began High Counselor Dravik Mord, his usually booming voice noticeably subdued, "you propose we simply withdraw from the Earth system, after mobilizing our entire battle fleet, based on the effects of some temporary human biochemical trick." Zorath straightened his posture. "The effects have diminished in intensity, yes. But they haven't disappeared, Counselor. Surely you've noticed." An uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber. Of course they'd noticed. Every Drelari exposed to the compound now carried an unwanted passenger, a shadow self that whispered consequences into their thoughts before actions were even taken. "The humans call it conscience," Zorath continued. "A built-in system for evaluating the moral implications of one's choices." "Preposterous," snapped Counselor Pelora Virax, her scales flushing an irritated orange. "We have ethics. We have laws. We don't need some emotional parasite interfering with clear strategic thinking." Zorath turned to face her directly. "Then why did you order the release of 7,000 political prisoners from the Arcturus mines last week?" "Counselor? An unusual action for someone who personally signed their internment orders. Wouldn't you say?" Vex's scales shifted to a telling purple.
"That was a resource allocation decision. Nothing more."
"Of course," Zorath replied, not bothering to hide his sarcasm. Just as Counselor Thax's sudden withdrawal of troops from Nebula Sector 7 was merely a tactical redeployment, and Counselor Kriv's unexpected reparation payments to the Centauri survivors were simply economic stimulus. He looked around the chamber, meeting each counselor's gaze in turn. We can lie to the public. We can even try to lie to each other. But we can no longer lie to ourselves. Something fundamental has changed. High Counselor Mord leaned forward, his massive frame casting a shadow across the platform. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that this human conscience is as permanent as you suggest. What exactly are you proposing, Commander Vex? That we dismantle our empire, apologize to every species we've conquered, become weak like the humans? Zorath considered his words carefully. 3 weeks had passed since the Earth encounter, 3 weeks of sleepless nights, of memories once filed as strategic data points now saturated with emotional context. 3 weeks of questioning everything he'd ever done or been ordered to do. I'm proposing we evolve, he finally said. The humans didn't weaken us. They awakened something that was already there, dormant. They showed us a truth about ourselves we've been engineered to ignore. He activated the holographic display in the center of the chamber. Images appeared, historical records from before the genetic modifications began. Ancient Drelari art, depicting scenes of mourning. Literature discussing concepts of regret and redemption. Medical texts describing the complete Drelari neurological system, pain pathways intact. Our ancestors felt the full spectrum of emotions, Zorath explained, including remorse, including empathy. They were conquerors, yes, but they weren't mindless destroyers. The pain suppression modifications began as a military advantage, but over generations they changed who we are as a species. Counselor Vex snorted. And this matters why. We've built the greatest empire in the galaxy because we aren't hampered by sentimentality. Have we? Zorath challenged. We control 17 systems, yes. But at what cost? Constant rebellions, depleted resources, populations who produce the bare minimum required to avoid punishment. For all our military might, we've created an empire of fear that requires ever-increasing resources to maintain control. He switched the display to show data from the oldest conquered world in their empire. Productivity on Meridian has increased 43% since the garrison commander who was exposed to the compound implemented new policies, eliminating physical punishment and establishing fair labor practices. Murmurs spread around the council chamber. This was unexpected. Similar results are emerging on 6 other worlds where exposed officers have modified colonial policies. Zorath continued. It appears that treating subject populations with basic dignity actually makes them more productive, not less. Who could have possibly imagined? The sarcasm in his voice was thick enough to cut with a vibroblade. High Counselor Mord's expression darkened. You are stepping dangerously close to sedition, Commander. I'm presenting facts, Counselor. Facts that challenge our assumptions. Isn't that what advanced species are supposed to do? Adapt when new information becomes available. Before Mord could respond, the chamber doors burst open. A squad of elite guards marched in, led by a Drelari female with military bearing and calculating eyes. Fleet Admiral Sabra Krell, Zorath acknowledged with a respectful nod. I wasn't aware you'd be joining us. I wasn't invited, Krell replied coldly. Fortunately, some members of this council still understand where their duty lies. She turned to address the assembled counselors. The human compound has created a critical vulnerability in our command structure. Those affected are compromised, their judgment clouded by these emotional disturbances. Her gaze locked onto Zorath. Commander Vex is Exhibit A, a decorated officer with an impeccable record, now advocating for the abandonment of core Dominion principles because of a temporary chemical imbalance. The effects aren't temporary, Admiral, Zorath countered, and they are not an imbalance. They are a restoration of our natural state. Admiral Krell smiled thinly. A convenient belief for someone seeking to justify weakness. She turned back to the council. Fortunately, I and my command staff were off-fleet during the Earth encounter. We remain unaffected and clear-minded. I've developed a 3-pronged response to this situation. She activated her own display, overlaying Zorath's with military tactical projections. First, all affected personnel will be relieved of duty and quarantined for treatment. Second, a new offensive against Earth will be launched immediately under my command. Third, Our scientific division has already begun work on a counter-agent to reverse the effects of the human compound. Zorath stepped forward. And if there is no counter-agent, if this is simply the restoration of neural pathways that were always meant to be connected, then we will find another solution, Krell snapped. Surgical modification if necessary. We will not allow the Dominion to be undermined by misplaced sentiment. The council chamber erupted in debate, councillors arguing amongst themselves. Some sided with Krell, others with Zorath, while a few seemed too conflicted to form a coherent position. Zorath raised his voice over the din. Before you decide, there's something else you should know. He nodded to Officer Taz, who had been standing quietly at the chamber's edge. She stepped forward and handed him a data crystal, which he inserted into the display system. New images appeared, surveillance footage from Earth, taken by cloaked probes in the days following the fleet's unexpected withdrawal. We've been monitoring the humans, Zorath explained. They anticipated Admiral Krell's exact response. They expected a second attack. The footage showed massive defense installations being brought online, weapon systems of surprising sophistication, shield technology that shouldn't have been possible for their development level. The humans knew we would return, Zorath continued. They knew some of us would resist the change, and they prepared accordingly. Admiral Krell scoffed. Primitive defenses. Nothing our fleet can't handle. Perhaps, Zorath conceded, but there's more. He switched to a different feed footage from inside what appeared to be a human military installation. Dr. Amara Jackson stood before rows of containers, each holding enough of the compound to affect an entire planetary population. They've weaponized it, Zorath explained. Developed delivery systems that can distribute the compound across an entire planet's atmosphere. If we attack Earth again, they won't just target our invasion fleet. They will target Drelari Prime itself. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Their homeworld, their entire species, forever changed by the human conscience compound. They are bluffing, Admiral Krell insisted, but there was a new note of uncertainty in her voice. Are they? Zorath challenged. Are you willing to gamble our entire way of life on that assumption? Because I've met these humans. I've seen what drives them. They will do exactly what they promise. He turned back to the council. But that's not even the most important revelation. With a final command, he changed the display once more. This time it showed medical scans, brain activity patterns from Drelari subjects, before and after exposure. Our scientists have been studying the effects, he explained. The results are unexpected. The reconnected neural pathways aren't just affecting our emotional responses, they are enhancing cognitive function, problem-solving abilities, creative thinking. The test subjects are scoring 15 to 20% higher on every metric we use to measure advanced intelligence. He let that sink in before delivering the final blow. We've been operating at reduced capacity for generations. The pain suppression modifications didn't just disconnect us from conscience, they limited our potential as a species. The humans didn't handicap us, they upgraded us. 3 months later, Zorath stood on a different platform, this one in the Grand Plaza of Drelari Prime. Beside him stood Dr. Amara Jackson, no longer a potential enemy, but an invited dignitary. Behind them, a mixed council of Drelari traditionalists and progressives watched with varying degrees of enthusiasm as representatives from 12 formerly subjugated species filed into the plaza. Are you sure about this? Dr. Jackson asked quietly. Not everyone in your government supports the new direction. Zorath nodded slightly. Admiral Krell and her faction remain skeptical, but they are a diminishing voice. The data is too compelling to ignore. Cooperative governance is yielding better results than conquest ever did. And the emotional adjustment, how are your people handling that? Zorath's mouth twisted in what humans might interpret as a wry smile. It varies. The younger generations are adapting quickly. Some of the older military castes are struggling. We've established support protocols to help them process centuries of actions they now feel differently about. He glanced at her. Your species has a concept called therapy. I understand. We've had to develop our own version rather rapidly. Dr. Jackson nodded. Collective trauma takes time to heal, but acknowledgement is the first step. The ceremony was about to begin, the formal establishment of the Galactic Cooperative, replacing the former Dominion. Member worlds would maintain autonomy while participating in mutual defense and trade agreements. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. There's something I've been meaning to ask you, Zorath said, keeping his voice low. Your compound. The way it reconnected our neural pathways so precisely, that kind of biochemical targeting requires intimate knowledge of Drelari physiology, knowledge that would have been impossible for humans to acquire through normal scientific exchange. Dr. Jackson met his gaze steadily. You are asking if we had help. I'm considering the possibilities, Zorath replied carefully. She smiled enigmatically. Let's just say humanity has made other friends among the stars, friends who also suffered under Drelari rule but who understood your biology better than we ever could alone. Before Zorath could press further, the ceremonial horns sounded, signaling the start of the proceedings. The conversation would have to wait. As he stepped forward to address the assembled representatives, Zorath felt a familiar sensation, that twinge of regret for past actions, now a constant companion. But alongside it, something else had grown stronger over the months, a sense of possibility, of potential paths forward that he'd never considered during his conquest-driven career. The humans called it hope. In a quiet corner of the rebuilt Galactic Archives on Meridian, Officer now Ambassador Nyla Taz sat across from a human journalist named Marcus Donovan. The interview had been going for nearly 2 hours, covering the remarkable transformation of the former Drelari Dominion into the fledgling Galactic Cooperative. One last question, Ambassador, Donovan said, leaning forward. There are rumors that the conscience compound didn't affect all Drelari equally, that some were completely immune. Is there any truth to that? Taz considered the question carefully. Official policy was transparency, but some truths remained complicated. There were varying degrees of response, she acknowledged finally. A small percentage, less than 2%, showed minimal effects. And what happened to them? Taz's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue. They were studied extensively. Our scientists determined that their neural structures had additional modifications, experimental alterations, beyond the standard pain suppression. Most were high-ranking military officers or government officials. Like Admiral Krell, Donovan pressed. Taz's eyes narrowed slightly. This human was well informed. The Admiral's medical status is classified. Of course, Donovan nodded, not looking particularly deterred. And the rumored Drelari outpost in the Omega sector? The one allegedly gathering former immunity cases for some kind of restoration project? Taz stiffened. This interview is concluded. After the journalist had been escorted out, Taz activated her secure communication link. Commander Vex, now Security Council Director Vex, answered immediately. We have a problem, she said without preamble. The humans know about Omega Sector. Vex's expression remained calm, but his scales darkened slightly. How much do they know? Enough to ask questions. Enough to connect it to Krell. Vex sighed. Her disappearance was too clean. I suspected she had inside help. What do we do? Accelerate the timeline. If Krell is building a resistance force of immunity cases, we need to find them before they can undo everything we've accomplished. Taz hesitated. And if we find them, what then? The question hung between them, heavy with implications. The old Zorath Vex would have ordered immediate extermination. The new Zorath considered more complex moral calculations. We offer them choice, he said finally, the same choice we've offered everyone else. Adapt to the new reality, or live in isolated containment away from those they might harm. And if they choose neither, if they fight, Zorath's 4 eyes reflected a conflict that would have been alien to him just months ago. The tension between security and compassion, between protecting the many and respecting the rights of the few. Then we will do what we must, he replied, but we will feel the weight of it. And that, Ambassador Taz, is the point. That's the difference between who we were and who we are becoming. After the communication ended, Taz gazed out at the meridian sunset. The former prison world was transforming literally and metaphorically. New construction rose alongside ancient ruins. Former captives worked alongside former captors, rebuilding a society neither had imagined possible. Not perfect, not painless, but progressing. Somewhere out there, Admiral Krell and her loyalists plotted to return the Drelari to their former glory, a state of emotional disconnection that had once seemed like strength but now appeared increasingly like a disability. The coming conflict was inevitable. Those who embraced the capacity for regret against those who still saw it as weakness. those who recognized the value of feeling consequences against those who preferred the cold comfort of indifference. Taz didn't know how it would end, but for the first time in her life she understood something the humans had always known: the ability to feel pain, to anticipate it, to recognize it in others, to allow it to guide your actions wasn't weakness at all. It was evolution. And despite the challenges ahead, despite the uncertainty and the struggle and the messy, complicated reality of living with a fully connected conscience, she wouldn't go back to the emotional numbness of before, not for anything. The humans had a saying that Dr. Jackson had shared during one of their cultural exchange sessions: better to feel the pain of growth than the emptiness of stagnation. As the twin suns of Meridian dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the once desolate world now bursting with new life, Ambassador Nyla Taz finally understood exactly what that meant. And for a species that had spent generations running from pain, learning to embrace it might be their greatest achievement yet.